Welcome to the Robert Lewis Sermon Podcast. The following is a session from Men's Fraternity. We hope that you're encouraged in your walk with Christ and enjoy this episode.
You know, we have been on quite a journey here together in Men's Fraternity, and today is a very special day because I want to give you a rough draft tool that you can work on that helps take all the information that we've been processing so far and bring it forward into this tool. And I want to begin this morning just by looking at our wiring again. If we could, we can stick it up on the screen. We talked about a man's wiring, and a number of you have told me how helpful this has been to you. Just to kind of put our life in a different perspective into a diagram about who I am and what life's all about, what are the components of life, where I'm going, and maybe most importantly, what's at stake. Because let me tell you guys, there's a lot at stake here with the way you live your life. If there's anything I hope to have communicated very strongly about thinking about life, is that somebody's watching and somebody cares. So what you do today is significant. What you're becoming is significant. If the things we've been presenting are truthful, then you are the grandest of God's creation. And you have a destiny that is absolutely fabulous. And how you conduct yourself and what you conduct yourself in and the thoughts you have and the things you invest yourself towards are part of this whole drama that's being played out in your life. And it's significant. Indeed, it's eternal. And so it's real important. What I've got behind me are just some of the elements that are a part of that. Your design and how your design carries over into the things that you will do today. And then we talked about, how much your past plays a part in your life. We're going to talk some about that next week. The things that maybe you've experienced in your past, both good and bad, that contribute to the decisions you make. And if some of those things aren't real clear in your life or hadn't been cleared up, they will undercut your pursuits this week. Then we talked about what's going on in your life right now, your problems and your convictions. And those all play into the kind of decisions that you'll be making today. Not only that, about the future. And we talked some about the future, about your dreams and God's purposes. And ultimately your destiny, your eternal destiny, and how those things come back and affect everything you do right now. Subconsciously, all that. Remember we use that air traffic controller illustration. All that's playing in your mind every day is the decisions you make. But how you're wired is very important. So what have we learned so far? Let me just summarize it with 3 statements there on your outline. First, we have said that the real adventure turns on how well you're wired. Remember I had you take your pencil, kind of like a circuit tester, and test each one of these things? So you could test your design. Do you know your design? And if you don't, if you're not clear about who you are and what really brings you alive, then that's a negative. The circuit test as interrupted or not very strong. Or you could take your little circuit tester and put it over your past and about the negatives of your past. Maybe you came out of a broken home, or maybe you had an absent dad, or maybe you had issues that went on, traumas in your childhood that never have really been dealt with. That's a negative circuit if you've never really dealt with that. Now, if you've dealt with it, it can become a tremendous positive. But if you haven't dealt with it, it will continue just to kind of undercut your life. We talked about dreams and things like that. Do you have a vision for your life? If it tests positive, that's a wonderful asset to your wiring. If it tests negative, life is just kind of a fog, then it has a huge negative impact on the way you live your life now. How well you're wired has everything to do with how much you experience the real adventure that God has for your life. Secondly, there are 2 ways to go through life. And I want to just summarize those again for you. First, it's what I call the comparing and competing way of life. Okay? It's the individual who really is not clear about what life's all about, so he's bought in as a man to just looking around rather than looking forward. And I meet guys every day that their whole life is designed by looking around. Looking at what the other guy's got and comparing himself. Looking at what the other guy's doing and saying, I'm going to beat him. and saying, that's how I'm going to measure my life, by comparing and competing. By the way, that is how men have lived their life since day one. I call it the reactive life. And the reactive life has a lot of unhealthy pressures connected to it. That competition, that comparing, it leads you to work much harder than really I think God ever intended. And rather than taking time out and enjoying life, you just kind of keep pushing to get harder and harder to stay ahead so I can feel good about myself. And the question is, why? Who's measuring besides you? Now, I said that this kind of way of life is as old as mankind himself. And, you know, it's interesting, even the Bible speaks about this. I want you to look at a statement in Ecclesiastes 4:4. Now, I want you to read with me, not out loud, but just follow along as I read this. And you see the very thing I'm talking about. Here's Solomon, one of the wisest men, looking at his world and the men in his world. And he's summarizing how they live. And here's what he says. And I have seen that every labor and every skill which is done is the result of what, guys? Say it out loud. Rivalry. Between a man and his neighbor. This too is vanity. It's empty. And striving after wind. He's going around, looking around and measuring his life by looking around in a world he doesn't even understand and thinking, if I can just have a better car than this guy, a bigger house, make a little more money, go to a few more places, then I can feel good about myself. And you know what I want you to know? That's vain. That's empty. That's worthless. It's got maybe a momentary little prideful pleasure attached to it, but it's never going to bring the deep satisfaction God ever intended. Here's the way it says it in the Living Bible. It's a little bit different. Then I observed that the basic motive for success is the driving force of envy and jealousy. We're talking 3,000 years ago, this guy's saying this. But it's been true of every generation. But this too is foolishness and chasing after wind. That's how you're living. It's empty. But it's a way of life that many, many men buy into. There's a second way, and it's what I call envisioning and enjoying. It's totally different. Rather than looking around, you're looking forward. And what I've been trying to do is stretch your forward thinking way out. Not only to the end of your life, but even past that. What happens after your life is ended? And crafting a path for yourself purposefully, consciously, rather than unconsciously, and rather than wandering around, being drawn by that vision out there through life. And it may cause you to walk a different road. It may cause you to do different things than everybody else is doing around you, but that's okay. If you've consciously chosen that, in your mind is saying, that's the best way to live, that will probably be the best way to live. And then you get to measure yourself by that vision. You know, I've watched guys with hobbies, and here in our area, there are all kinds of different hobbies that guys get into, whether it's golf or hunting and whatever, and you'll see guys get involved in that, not because they enjoy it, because they think they have to do it to measure up with the rest of the guys. And I've noticed in some of those kind of events, I'll be talking to a guy and he said, yeah, I really don't like this. And I go, why in the heck are you doing it? Well, you know, everybody else is doing it. I mean, here's a guy who's maybe out in waders and 0-degree temperature duck hunting and hating it, when what he'd rather be doing is reading a book and talking about it with a group of friends around some coffee early in the morning. Some classic. And yet nobody's ever given him permission to do what he needs to do, because he thinks he has to do what everybody else is doing. What a poor way to live. But when you enjoy and envision, when you envision and you enjoy, that's a whole different way, because you know exactly why you're doing it and you're glad you're doing it. I call that the proactive life. And rather than unhealthy pressures, it has what I call healthy pursuits. And guys, if there's one thing I want to give as a gift to every guy in here, it's that you feel like you're pursuing life. The life that God has for you. And it's clear in your mind why you're doing it. And it brings joy to your life, and it's healthy for your life. Ephesians reminds us how important that is. It says, therefore, be careful how you walk. The word walk in the Bible is just how you live your life. Not as an unwise man. Not as a man that has to be pressured to do things. Not as a man who is comparing and competing. That's so unwise. But as a wise man, making the most of your time because the days are evil, and they are. These days will take away your life and your design and how you're wired and tell you you've got to fit into some kind of prefab mold. And that's so wrong for you. You need to discover what's you and live out that design in a way that's joyous. Proverbs 16:9 simply reminds us too, even as we plan, that the mind of a man plans his way. We all should have our plans. But in the end, it's going to be the Lord who will direct our steps. There'll be some things that we'll come up with that in time won't pan out, and that's okay. Ultimately, there's a God, I believe, who's in control of all this destiny. But He wants us to think about our life and where we're going and who we are and why we're here. Because we'll make the most out of our days if we do so. We've learned that here in Men's Fraternity. And finally, we've learned it's best to begin with the end in mind. And that's why we've spent the last few weeks dealing with death and eternity. Because that is our end. And every one of us is appointed to that moment. And so it's good to come back and ask, okay, what does that mean in light of where I'm headed? Now, let's look at what we've covered so far, because I want you to see we've gone a lot further than maybe some of you have thought. So I want to put the diagram back up here for a moment. And I just want you to see how we're fleshing out this diagram just in the moments we're together in Men's Fraternity. First of all, we started Men's Fraternity just talking about a man's pursuits. And if you'll remember in the opening sessions when we were here, we spent a lot of time talking a lot about the fact that a lot of men really aren't enjoying life. In fact, we said the common pursuit of a man's life is to get weighed down in life and to get slumped over by the time he gets to the end. When I was a student, I remember buying some Time Life books. And in those Time Life books, especially the ones that had the origins of life, they showed man evolve from the monkey to Homo erectus. And so man started this way. He started down, with his arms this way, and then it would show him through the millions of years slowly come up until the end. He was standing there with a suit and a tie on. Okay? I wish that's the way we lived, where we went from slump to standing. But you know how man really lives? How so many of you have lived your life? We start this way, tall and strong. And we start going out in life and taking on the issues of life. We take some hits along the way. And we start, as we saw in our present pursuits, loading ourselves up with a job, loading ourselves up with responsibilities, a wife, a family, a home, a mortgage, debt, promotions, competitions with men. And over time, here's the way we start looking. Until we get to be at 55 and we're down here. We go just the opposite direction. And that's what this whole Men's Fraternity is about. It's about getting you to stand up. So we looked at those present pursuits and we said, life is not just about responsibilities. Life is about enjoying the adventure that God has for you. So we look there. And then secondly, we move from that to God's purposes. We talked about, what is the adventure? And so to answer that, we looked in the book of Genesis 1:28 in particular, and we saw that man has a number of adventures given to him. He has a family adventure that he should enjoy. He has a world to enjoy. We call it the man-size adventures for him. They're just fun, just to enjoy life. Just to tell guys that kind of makes them want to stand up again. You should be enjoying life. Take some time and do certain things and get out. We talked about the fact that there is a cause for men. that they've been created to fight this world in a good sense. You may start that in the wrong sense, but eventually there's a way to leave a legacy where you've made the world a better place, your community a better place, your family a better family, because men need a cause to fight for that's bigger than them. We talked about that. That's an adventure, finding out who I am and why I'm here. Then finally, a spiritual adventure with God. I mean, what a shame to finish this life and never to have experienced God and the wonder of that. And I hope that you've had a few little glimpses of that as we've gone through, especially the last few weeks. So we focused there for a while and looked at God's purposes. Then the last couple of weeks, we've been focusing out in eternity and death, the legacy that we leave when we die, and then the eternity that we go to. So we've been focused there. Now, just to let you know kind of where we're going, next week we're going to focus back into the diagram around convictions and problems and the negatives. We're going to look at those three areas. We're going to spend just a couple of weeks talking about those because we need to kind of get into the now. This is going to be very practical stuff. And then as we've already talked about, starting in January, we're going to go and look at birth and design and get back in the beginning and spend 6 weeks there finding out how we've been crafted so that we get a better clarity about who we are and what really brings us alive. What I want to do this morning, though, is focus on not God's purposes in the future, not death and eternity, but I still want to look forward into my dreams. That's where we're going to be here in the next few moments. What are my dreams? This morning, we're going to do a practical project together. In fact, we're going to finish a little early, and we're going to work for just a few moments with this tool that I've been telling you about. I think it's the most practical project an adventurer can ever work on. We're only going to start. But it's a project. What I like about this project, it's an ongoing project. It's a project that you can use the rest of your life. You know, in olden days when guys were set on the high seas or were taking these long journeys across country, they needed some way to keep their bearings, and they would usually use the heavens to keep their bearings, a north star that they could use to navigate themselves to the place that they wanted to get to. Today we have more advanced instruments. In fact, last year my son went out and bought a GPS, Global Positioning Satellite Instrument. And so here's my son in the back of the car, and we're driving up to Fayetteville, and he turns that thing on and locks into a satellite. And so he's in the back of the car telling me exactly how fast I'm going, the next exit I'm about to get to. He can tell me to the second when we'll drive into the city limits of Fayetteville. It's an amazing, amazing instrument. And those instruments, whether it's a GPS or whether it's a North Star, are there for a purpose when you're on a journey. They're there, as you know, to keep you on track, to keep you focused, to keep you clear on where you are going and how well you're doing getting to your destination, right? Well, now here's the question. What instrument do you have to keep you on track in life? And to be clear that you're getting to where you want to go to and how well you're doing in the process. See, oftentimes we don't have an instrument like that. So I'm going to give you a North Star instrument. Now, a little sample of it's on your outline that you can fill out. But here's the North Star. It's just in a little statement. Here's the statement. Before I die, okay? Before I die, I want to. There it is. You say, that's it? Well, pretty much. We're going to fill in a few blanks that you can begin to put your life, your entire life down on paper. So before I die, I want to be what? That's one of the blanks. Before I die, I want to do what? Before I die, I want to have what? Before I die, I want to help. Who? Before I die, I want to enjoy what? Before I die, I want to leave what? See, this is a North Star instrument. This is your compass in life because you can summarize your whole life. Now, as simple as it is, here's what I want you to know. It's a profound instrument because it forces a man to get out of the fog, to get refocused on his adventure, and to clarify why he wants to live his life and what he wants to live his life for and what he wants his life to accomplish and what he wants to experience in his life. He can put it all down on paper. He could carry it around with him. He could pull it out at any time and go, how am I doing? It's his compass. He could say, am I doing what I want to do? Am I becoming what I want to become? Am I enjoying what I want to enjoy? Am I helping who I want to help? He can ask all those questions just with that simple little tool. I've been working on mine now for about 8 months. And you always do it with a pencil. Because you'll write some things down, but every time you go back to it, you get a little deeper. You think a little harder about what you want your life really to accomplish. When you're younger, and there are a lot of young men here in the audience, a lot of times you'll focus not very far in the future, and as you get way into the future, it gets more general. But as you're older, you get much more specific because you realize time's running out. That's what I've discovered. Now, just for the sake of letting you in a little bit into my life, I'm going to tell you some of the things I've written down under those categories. Okay, because I'm just about to turn 52. This is birthday month for me. And so I'm going to turn 52. So I'm looking at my life now. And so I go, okay, what do I want to be before I die? Now you think that's a question a guy who's 22 years old ought to be asking. What does he want to be? Not a guy 52. He's already become. Oh no, that's a big mistake. Because at 52, there's a lot of things I still want to be. So I wrote down, one of the things I want to do before I die, I want to be a football coach again. Again, because I did it one time. And I enjoyed it and I loved it. And I've always wanted to go back and do that again. And before I die, I'm going to do that again. Before I die, I want to be an influential church consultant. Because I love coming alongside young pastors and helping them discover the wonder of creating a church. Because I've had the privilege of doing it. Those are two things I want to be in the second half of my life. One thing I want to do, okay, this is something I've been stewing on for about 15 years. Before I die, I'm going to write a screenplay for a movie. And I know what the script already is, because it's a true story that I saw in my hometown. And I thought, it would make a great movie. And I started thinking, well, why don't I write that up sometime? And I started thinking, well, how would I ever get that to somebody? I don't know. But why wouldn't I want to do something like that? I can write. Before I die, I want to have. Well, what do I want to have? I want to have traveled in every continent of the world and experienced the cultures of every continent in the world. Before I die, I want to help who? Before I die, I want to help plant 100 churches of 1,000 people or more that will transform their communities. And I've been working on that for a number of years, and some of you know we've already started that process here, and I want to be a part of that. But before I die, I want to look out in the landscape and know that part of what I've done is set up transformation centers around the United States and around the world. Before I die, I want to enjoy what? One of the things I want to enjoy is I want my wife and I to spend the summer on an archaeological site, preferably Greek or Roman, digging up some city or some event, and I want to participate in that. Before I die, I want to leave what? I want to leave a leadership institute here in Little Rock for training men to become leaders around the world. Now, I've experienced a lot in my life, but I only think I'm beginning. Because those are just some of the things. I got a list of things I want to do, but I wanted to kind of just let you in on how you think about those things, because you get to craft your future. And what I think most guys are doing at my point in life is they've got, before I die, I want to, and they've only got one word under there, retire. I want to retire. And the reason they're thinking that is because that becomes an undefined dream, just like heaven, that when they finish, they're really going to have something. And here's what I've discovered, because I'm a pastor and I get to be with guys. Most guys who retire, who had that dream, it was a vague, undefined script, never really thought through, couldn't wait to rest and stuff. When they get there and they finally get it and they've retired, about 2 or 3 months or about a year into it, it becomes hell. Because they have no purpose, and they have no meaning, and they have no vision, and you can only enjoy something so long. And I'm saying, God has given us the ability to write a script. Now, some of it He may blow away and say, no, that's too much. Some of it He may come back and say, oh yeah, and breathe life into it and life into you in the process. That's what I mean by a tool like this. So simple and yet so profound. Let me make some observations about this tool just for a moment, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to start on it. First is this. This is your opportunity to proactively craft your adventure rather than wandering through life, even if you become a success. Becoming a success is not going to fulfill your life, guys. Mark it down. There are a lot of successfully bored, purposeless people in America. But this is your opportunity to proactively craft your adventure. Secondly, as you do it, when I give you this tool here in a moment, be realistic but not restrictive about your dreams. I mean, you can take a sheet like this and put down things that are just fantasies, and I don't want you to fantasize your life away either. On the other hand, I don't want you to think small. I want you to think big about what you could be and what you could do and where you could go. You know, I mentioned to you I've had this movie script in my mind for a long time. It's just so interesting that this last year I got to meet a filmmaker in Hollywood. We've become friends. So I'm really thinking about now the next step. But you know, I would have never put those two together if I didn't have something written down I was thinking about it. So be realistic but not restrictive about your dreams. Thirdly, find someone to help you dream. And you need somebody to pull those deep thoughts out of you. You know, the Proverbs, in the book of Proverbs, it says, you know, there are men who can pull dreams out of other men, like somebody reaching down in a deep well and pulling water out of a deep well. So you may need a guy to sit down who can just help you think about your life. And there's some people who are really gifted to help you think better and bigger about your life. And if you know of a guy like that, you might just sit and say, you know, I'm just working on this. I'm just thinking, what do you think about me? This is kind of intimate stuff. You don't want to share this with anybody but a safe person. But there are guys who could sit down and just think with you about your life. And they know you. And whether you're young or middle-aged or older, they can sit down and say, man, you would do great at this. And it's always going to require a step of courage. Life will never, ever stop being a courageous step. So don't think it's ever going to be easy. It's not. We're talking about fulfillment and adventure. And the precursor to that always will be faith and courage. Okay? But you may need somebody to help pull those dreams out of you. Fourth, this is to those guys who are a little bit older here in the audience today. It is never too late to start the adventure. I have older men a lot of times in men's fraternity come up and say, gosh, I wish I'd have known this 20 years ago. That's a backward look. We're looking forward. No, you know it today. So you can start the adventure today. You know, I love the story about Colonel Sanders, you know. When he was 65 years old Colonel Sanders, he had only done a couple of real small businesses, and at 65, he got in his new adventure, frying chicken. And then built an empire, starting at 65. Well, if a guy can do that in an enterprise like that, we can do that as older men. We can reclaim, if we've lost the first half, we can reclaim the second half. The thing you don't want to do is live in a pity party the second half, all because of what you did in the first half. You want to reclaim your life. You're an adventurer. Go for it. Fifth, young men will need to dream what I call first half dreams primarily. If you're a younger guy, and I'm going to say under 40, many of your dreams may need to be what I call first half dreams. First half of your life. I still have a sheet of paper, it's all yellow now, that I wrote out 20-something years ago on a trip to Memphis, Tennessee with my wife. And I sat down in a hotel room and I tried to plan my life. Didn't do a great job, but I wrote down some things that I thought were absolute impossibilities for me at the time. I'd just been in Little Rock a short period of time. I was poor as I could be, and I thought, here's some things I'd like to do. And I wrote them down. And in fact, I went back and looked at my little sheet for this address. There were 4 things on there in particular that jumped off the page. I wanted to build a house. I didn't even have enough money for a down payment for a house, but I thought, I'd like to build a house someday. I wanted to write a book, but I couldn't think of anything I wanted to write about. In fact, those are still in my little notes. What would I write a book about? I didn't know. I wanted to get my doctorate. Now, that was more reasonable because I had gotten a master's, so I was thinking about a doctorate. And I wanted to see the world. Those are all first half dreams. Every one of those dreams have been accomplished. And it feels good. But there's so much more for everybody here in the room. I've encouraged my kids to dream, even as they were college students, even as they were high school students. I encouraged, I said, one of the things I did is I tried to see the world. You ought to try to see the world. And I didn't realize my kids were hearing that. And I remember my daughter coming to me when she was a freshman in college saying, Dad, I want to see the world like you saw the world. And said, I got on the computer and planned out me a whole summer backpacking in Europe. Can I go? And I said, yeah. So she took a friend and off they went. I remember calling me one morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. She was with Fabrizio in Rome, Italy, on a moped. I started rethinking my decision. But my son this year, when he finished his freshman year in college, the first thing he did, he took his last final, and him and 3 friends, they drove to Little Rock and got on a plane and flew to Germany and backpacked Europe. Because they have dreams. They've thought about them in advance. You men need to think about it, especially you young men, because this 6th statement's for you. The younger you start this proactive process, the greater the return rather than regret on your life. The greater the adventure. And here's the most important thing for you young guys, the greater the nobility. Because you have an opportunity to write down what you want to be without a lot of scar tissue. You can decide whether you want to be a real man or not. And you can write down statements about purity and faithfulness and contribution to society and those kind of things, and live out those dreams. And finish your life looking back over a much greater landscape than some of us had the opportunity, and realize what a contribution you did make to society and what a good name you have and what an incredible legacy you're going to leave. Because you dream big dreams as a noble man. So today we're all going to start with a draft. That's number 7, with a draft, and finish men's fraternity in March with a solid plan. So today's only a draft. I'm going to have the guys who are helping us with men's fraternity come down real quickly. And as they come down, just close your notebook for a moment. What you're going to receive is this sheet right here. This is your little tool that I want you to have. So they're going to come down and give it to you. And what we're going to do is we're going to take 10 minutes, just 10 minutes, and all I want you to do is just dream, just for a moment, about one thing under each one of these categories. Okay? Let's just start the process. You can mess this thing up. We'll give you another one. I'm going to give you a permanent one you can carry with you that I think you'll really like. But to start today, what I want you to do is just take this sheet and use this. It's only a draft. It's a little worksheet. But I want you just to take a moment and do what men rarely have an opportunity to do. Just dream a little bit. And write down one thing if you can think of. You can't, just write down what you can think of. But write down one dream under each one of these. Because let me tell you guys, this will be the most important thing you'll ever do as an adventurer. This will be the most important thing you'll ever do.
Thank you for listening to this week's message. It really helps us when you rate and review this podcast. If you found today's teaching helpful, take time to do that today. This podcast was produced by the team at Sound of a Rose. Visit soundofarose.com for any of your podcasting needs.